Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, today, wow, we are wrestling with a truly immense stack of sources. Seriously deep stuff.
It really is.
Stuff that challenges and kind of redefines the limits of the human body. We're talking foundational, proactive, everything from optimizing things before pregnancy all the way to your oral microbiome.
Right, the mouth-body connection.
Exactly. And then we pivot like dramatically into the future,
Yeah.
exploring cutting-edge brain-computer interfaces.
Which sounds like science fiction, but it's happening now.
Totally. And then the ultimate philosophical challenge, achieving, well, radical longevity and confronting the spirituality of death itself.
Is a massive scope, yeah. And for you, our dedicated learner listening in, our mission today is really synthesis.
Bringing it all together.
Exactly. We're bridging these fields that seem so separate, right? Like the dense molecular science of metabolism, the mechanics and engineering of neurosurgery, and then this deep existential wisdom from end-of-life care.
To pull out knowledge that you can actually use.
That's the goal. Actionable wisdom. We're looking for those surprising connections, those, profound aha moments. Things that optimize life from the cells right up to the spirit.
Okay, so we've broken this deep dive into three main parts, three acts, if you will.
Good way to structure it.
We'll kick things off with that foundational blueprint. Building a resilient life, the health stuff you just can't ignore.
The non-negotiables.
Then we'll zoom right into the brain, super complex mechanics, the amazing work in neurosurgery, those brain interfaces.
Yep.
It's wild stuff, redefining human capability.
Really pushing boundaries there.
And we'll wrap it all up by connecting all this knowledge, all this tech, to the ultimate question, the spiritual journey of longevity and, well, death.
Bringing the science and the soul together in a way.
Okay, let's unpack this. All right, segment one, the blueprint for a resilient life, health, nutrition, optimization.
Foundations.
Let's begin right at the starting line. Proactive risk reduction, especially around pregnancy. We're looking at the work of Dr. Jeff Zeta here. His research really tackles autism risk reduction, looking at that critical interplay between our genes and our environment.
Yeah, and Dr. Zeta's approach is, I think, really powerful because it emphasizes interventions that are pretty low cost, but potentially have a really high impact.
Accessible stuff.
Exactly. And maybe the most consistent finding he talks about revolves around adequate vitamin supplementation. It's not just a minor point for him.
Okay.
He emphasizes that multiple long-term studies, including one really significant 20-year study, consistently show that getting enough vitamins, specifically starting before you even conceive.
Before, that's the key word again.
Yes, before. It may significantly reduce the risk of autism.
So the timing then, it's everything. This isn't about, running to the store after you get a positive test.
Not at all. It's about optimizing your baseline health, potentially months in advance, setting the stage.
Makes sense.
And this is where Dr. Zeta makes a really nuanced but super vital distinction about folate.
Folate, okay.
Yeah, most people know folic acid, right? That's the synthetic, the artificial version you find in most standard prenatal vitamins. But Dr. Zeta points out that our bodies actually utilize the more natural version called methylfolate much, much more easily.
Methylfolate, got it.
And here's the kicker. Methylfolate is only included in about, 15 to 20% of prenatals out there?
Seriously? Only 15–20%?
Shocking, right. And this distinction is crucial, especially for people who might have genetic variations. MTHFR is a common one that impair their ability to convert that artificial folic acid into the form their body can actually use.
Wow. That distinction alone feels like a huge takeaway for anyone even thinking about pregnancy.
Absolutely. Immediate high-value info.
But it's also fascinating you mentioned this link, how having adequate nutrient levels can act like a shield against environmental threats.
It's truly amazing, yeah. Dr. Zeta cites this finding where adequate folate levels seem to, effectively break the link between high lead exposure in pregnant women and higher rates of autism in their kids.
So the folate was protective, even against something like lead?
Essentially, yes. It seemed to act like a protective shield, possibly helping the detoxification process in the baby's developing brain against those environmental heavy metals. It just underlines that these micronutrients aren't just, ticking a box. They're active defense mechanisms.
So folate is huge. What else does Dr. Zeta stress? Iron comes up, right?
Oh, iron is massive.
Yeah.
He really stresses this. It's often overlooked in the early planning stages.
Why is it such a big deal?
Well, get this. Up to 50% of women might already be iron deficient before they even get pregnant.
Half. Wow.
Yeah. Then, once you are pregnant, your blood volume expands dramatically, right? So the demand for iron skyrockets. And if you get hit with morning sickness early on,
Oh, yeah. Makes it hard to eat, let alone build up reserve.
exactly, catching up on those iron levels becomes incredibly difficult. And Dr. Zeta points to some really compelling evidence showing that early pregnancy anemia is linked with nearly double the rate of intellectual disability, plus increased risks for conditions like autism and ADHD. So addressing iron proactively before pregnancy is just a major cornerstone of his recommendations for building that resilient foundation.
Okay, crucial. Now, what about that slightly odd idea you mentioned, pulsing the supplementation, the Bertrand rule, taking breaks?
Ah, yes. That came up. It does sound a bit counterintuitive, taking a break from something so important.
Yeah.
And Dr. Zeta presented this more as an evolving kind of preliminary idea from some Finnish researchers. It speaks to this concept of regulation.
Regulation. How so?
Well, the suggestion from these researchers was that taking breaks from daily B12 and folate, like maybe 5 days on, 2 days off, might actually help the body better regulate the uptake and maybe the utilization of those vitamins.
Huh. Any idea why?
The thought came from some studies that linked very high persistent concentrations of B12, for example, to potentially less protective benefit. So it's preliminary, like I said, but it's a fascinating insight. Reminds us that even with essential nutrients, balance and how the body metabolizes them is really key. It's not always just more is better.
Interesting nuance. And quickly, any other environmental toxins he flagged beyond lead?
Yeah, briefly, he touched on common things to avoid the usual suspects, like heating food in plastic containers in the microwave, potential risks from chemicals used in dry cleaning, things that add to the overall toxic load.
Okay, so we've covered that internal foundation. Now, shifting focus. Let's talk about the gateway to the body. Systemic health starting in the mouth. Dr. Dominik Nischwitz, the biological dentist. His perspective really reframes dental health, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Nischwitz's philosophy is pretty transformative. He insists that traditional dentistry often just treats symptoms. Sees tooth decay or weak teeth as just mechanical failures needing a filling or a crown.
Like fixing a pothole.
Kind of, yeah. But he views these things as a profound sign of systemic deficiency. As he puts it, weak teeth, bone loss in the jaw. It reflects a softer body in general, meaning a body that's depleted of core nutrients, not just locally in the mouth, but throughout the entire system. The mouth is like a window showing what's happening deeper inside.
So he's trying to shift the whole profession, moving dentists from being just tooth mechanics to being health experts. He calls it bioidentity 3.0.
That's his term, yeah. And in practice, it means focusing on identifying and removing hidden, chronic inflammatory triggers in the mouth, things often missed.
Like what specifically?
He details 3 major areas. First, removing certain metals like mercury amalgam fillings. Second, a big one, is the danger he sees in root canals.
Ah, root canals. Always controversial.
Very. He views them essentially as a dead, necrotic organ left in the body, potentially harboring chronic hidden infections. And third, addressing something called jawbone cavitations, areas of incomplete healing after tooth extractions, which can also harbor bacteria and inflammation.
And he thinks these hidden issues can cause problems elsewhere in the body.
He strongly suggests they can. He stresses that these hidden chronic foci, often totally overlooked by conventional approaches, could be the root cause of seemingly unrelated systemic problems. Things like persistent brain fog, chronic fatigue, even skin issues like eczema, especially in people who feel like they've already cleaned up their diet and lifestyle.
That is a very strong stance, particularly on root canals. For listeners who might have had one, does he offer any nuance? Like, when is removal absolutely needed versus maybe monitoring?
He maintains a pretty firm position based on the source material. His view is that root canals represent a source of chronic bacterial load that the body simply shouldn't have to carry.
So, no gray area for him.
Less so. While he acknowledges the challenges of removal and restoration, his core philosophy really dictates that for long-term health optimization, you need to remove these potential sources of chronic low-grade infection. He believes the toxins produced by anaerobic bacteria inside those canals can continuously stress the immune system.
Okay. Powerful perspective. What about daily habits? What common things does he warn us against? I'm guessing standard mouthwash is on the list?
You guessed it. He argues we're often unknowingly nuking our oral microbiome.
Nuking it.
Yeah, it's the second largest microbiome in the body. It's our critical first line of defense against pathogens trying to get into our digestive and respiratory systems. And those conventional ethanol-based mouthwashes, he says they're highly acidic and just indiscriminately kill off everything, the good bacteria along with the bad.
Disrupting the balance.
Totally. And another tip,
Yeah.
if you choose to switch to a fluoride-free toothpaste, which many people are doing,
Right.
you must make sure it contains an active, beneficial ingredient, something like hydroxyapatite.
Hydroxyapatite, what's that?
It's actually the main mineral component of tooth enamel and bone. So it's a nutrient that can physically help strengthen and remineralize the tooth enamel. He argues it provides a real benefit, far superior to just brushing with some kind of nutrient-free base paste that simply lacks fluoride. Need something active working for you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Okay, let's shift our focus now. From foundational nutrients to more personalized performance metrics. Specifically, let's get into the work of Dr. Michael Snyder on metabolic health. He really hammers home this idea that individual variability is everything.
Yeah, Dr. Snyder's work is critical here. It provides clear confirmation. Yes, high prolonged glucose spikes are definitely harmful. We know they're associated with cardiovascular risk, long-term health decline, all that stuff.
All right, the basics.
But the crucial insight, the game changer, is that our reaction to different foods is intensely individual, highly personal.
How so?
Well, his continuous glucose monitoring studies show that one person might eat a banana and see their blood sugar shoot way up, stay high for a while. Another person eats the same banana, perfect stability. Conversely, that second person might eat a standard pasta dish and see a huge spike, while the first person handles it just fine. So this variability means that generic one-size-fits-all diet advice, avoid all carbs or bananas are bad, is often just inadequate. It might even be counterproductive for some individuals.
So personalization goes beyond just food triggers. He talks about needing to move past the simple type 1 and type 2 diabetes labels.
Well,
right, Len?
absolutely. That's a huge part of his work. Dr. Snyder's lab really emphasizes the critical distinction between different type 2 diabetes subphenotypes.
Subphenotypes, meaning different underlying causes.
Exactly. We need to understand, is a patient primarily muscle insulin resistant, meaning their muscle cells just aren't responding properly to insulin signaling? Or do they have more of a beta cell defect, where the pancreas, specifically the beta cells, isn't producing enough insulin, or maybe the timing of the release is off?
And why is knowing that specific type so critical?
Because the interventions, lifestyle changes, medications, they have to be tailored to the specific problem. It's foundational.
Can you give an example of why that distinction is so important for treatment?
Sure. Take a specific drug, like repaglinide. It works by stimulating the pancreas to release more insulin.
Okay.
So it's highly effective for someone whose main issue is that beta cell defect. They just aren't making enough insulin. Give them repaglinide, it helps.
Makes sense.
But if a patient is primarily muscle insulin resistant, giving them repaglinide is basically useless, maybe even counterproductive. The problem isn't a lack of insulin. It's that the target cells, the muscles, can't use the insulin that's there.
Gotcha. So you need to know the root cause.
Precisely. Dr. Snyder's work pushes for this sophisticated molecular-level categorization before prescribing treatment. It highlights that even something we call type 2 diabetes is really a collection of several distinct underlying diseases.
Fascinating. And what about practical, actionable lifestyle takeaways from his research? I remember something about timing, exercise, and meals based on these subtypes.
Yes, that's one of the most powerful conclusions from his team's work. They found that people identified as muscle insulin resistant, which is actually the most common subphenotype, they achieve significantly better glucose control if they schedule their exercise in the morning rather than later in the day.
Morning exercise for that group. Interesting.
Yeah. And furthermore, across many different phenotypes, there seems to be a general benefit to kind of front-loading your calories.
Bigger breakfast, smaller dinner.
Essentially, yes. Having your largest meal in the morning tends to lead to lower overall glucose levels across the whole 24-hour period compared to eating your biggest meal late in the evening. It just reinforces how important it is to align our eating patterns with our natural circadian rhythms.
Okay, now let's connect these personalized metabolic ideas directly to something so many people struggle with. Fatigue. Chronic fatigue. Dr. Rupy Aujla has some great insights here, especially on that paradox that sitting still actually makes us more tired. Seems backward.
It does seem backward, but Dr. Aujla explains it beautifully. He links sedentary behavior directly back to our mitochondria, the little power plants in our cells.
Okay.
See, a lack of movement actually generates low-grade chronic systemic inflammation throughout the body.
Just from sitting.
Yeah. And this inflammation, in turn, directly causes mitochondrial dysfunction. The power plants start working inefficiently.
So less energy production.
Exactly. Since mitochondria generate ATP, our body's energy currency, a lack of movement literally creates a cellular energy crisis. So, yeah, inactivity paradoxically depletes our energy supply at the most fundamental level.
Wow. So movement isn't just burning calories, it's powering up the factories.
Precisely. Dr. Aujla emphasizes that regular movement increases both the efficiency and the actual number of mitochondria. More factories, working better, resulting in greater sustained energy over the long term.
So we're essentially starving our energy factories by sitting on the couch too much. Okay, what's the other major fatigue culprit Dr. Aujla points to? Something almost everyone is guilty of.
Circadian misalignment.
The body clock.
Yep. That whole phenomenon of social jet lag. Sleeping in late on Saturday and Sunday. We all are sometimes. But when you do that, you throw off your master time regulator. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, located deep in the hypothalamus.
Yeah, CN.
The SCN dictates everything. Hormone release, metabolic timing, alertness throughout the entire body, and inconsistency, according to Dr. Aujla, just leaves the body perpetually sluggish. It's constantly trying to recalibrate its internal clock, leading to that feeling of low energy and mental fog.
So consistency is king. If that's the case, what are the main tools in Dr. Aujla's anti-fatigue toolkit?
It really focuses on reinforcing that natural rhythm.
Yeah.
So number one, maintain consistent bedtimes and wake times, even on weekends, as much as possible.
Tough, but important.
Number two, prioritize getting bright light exposure early in the morning, ideally within about 30 minutes of waking up. That blast of light signals the SCN, okay, the day has started, synchronize everything.
Sunlight, ideally.
Sunlight is best, yeah. And number three, crucially, optimize your nutrition to avoid those energy peaks and valleys. Specifically, prioritize protein and fiber in the morning. Avoid those high-carbohydrate, sugary breakfasts that lead to an immediate blood sugar surge, followed by that inevitable crash later.
Right, the mid-morning slump.
Exactly. That just exacerbates the fatigue cycle. Protein and fiber provide more sustained energy release.
Okay, let's transition to a slightly different kind of optimization now. Thinking about culinary philosophy, we looked at Jerry Greenberg, the restaurateur behind places like Sugarfish and Woo. He focuses on optimization, but from the angle of flavor and quality control, which maybe surprisingly aligns with a lot of health principles.
Yeah, it's interesting how those worlds connect. Jerry Greenberg really shares that viewpoint with the health experts we've discussed. He argues that the constant vilification of specific food types, the black and white thinking of keto is evil or paleo is the only way, it's ultimately unhealthy. It distracts from the core issue. His emphasis, like theirs, is on balance, yes, but most critically, on dramatically reducing ultra-processed foods. He points out that for many Americans, these foods account for like 60% to even 90% of their total calorie intake.
That high? Wow.
Yeah. He says if we're arguing about whether the remaining 10% or 20% of our diet is processed, we're actually having the right argument. The big win is cutting down that massive chunk of ultra-processed stuff first.
Makes sense. Focus on the big rocks. He also gives some really specific practical advice for home cooks, things that separate them from a pro chef. What are his top tips for better flavor without just loading up on unhealthy cheats?
His key advice really starts with salt. Simple, but crucial.
Salt.
Yeah. Greenberg points out that home cooks almost universally undersalt their food.
Really? I thought we were supposed to cut back on salt.
Well, his point is that undersalting leaves the flavor tasting flat or dull.
Yeah.
And when food tastes flat, what do people instinctively do? They often overcompensate by adding too much sugar or too much fat to make it palatable.
Oh, interesting. So proper salting brings out inherent flavors.
Exactly. And he also warns against the overuse of fat and butter, specifically as a cheat. A common technique just to add richness and texture, make things taste wow easily. He argues that a quality protein, like a perfectly cooked steak, should taste primarily like the steak itself, not just like a vehicle for butter and fat. The fat should enhance, not dominate.
Good point. Quality ingredients speaking for themselves. Okay, finally, what's Jerry Greenberg's take on the whole seed oil debate? It's super controversial, and his restaurants, like Hi Ho Burger, actually use them. He doesn't seem to advocate banning them.
No, he doesn't. His stance is really rooted in quality control and management. He rejects the idea of total vilification, calling it another example of that harmful black and white thinking.
So what's his argument for using them?
For restaurants that rely on frying, he argues the key differentiator isn't if you use seed oils, but how you manage them. Rotation and quality are everything. He points out that his Hi Ho Burger joint, which uses seed oils for fries, filters that oil up to 10 times a day.
10 times a day.
Yeah, to maintain quality and prevent breakdown. It's that rigorous process, he argues, that avoids the oil becoming rancid and causing that heavy, greasy feeling that often makes people feel sluggish after eating deep-fried food elsewhere. So for him, it's about meticulous management and discernment, not outright prohibition.
All right, we've built the blueprint for a resilient body. Now let's make the jump to the most complex frontier, the human brain. Segment 2, the evolving brain, neurosurgery and interfaces. Where do we even start? Maybe with the history.
Yeah, the history provides great context. The foundations of modern neurosurgery really owe a massive debt to Harvey Cushing. He's widely seen as the father of the field.
Right, Cushing, known for his surgical skill.
Yes, but what the sources really emphasize is not just his technical skill, but his brilliance as an internist and an incredibly astute observer. Before modern imaging even existed, Cushing was able to identify some of the earliest pituitary tumors. He understood their effects on the endocrine system, on overall health, just through careful observation and clinical insight.
Wow, that observational genius really set the stage for all the tech that came later.
Absolutely. And speaking of tech leaps, the pace of change, especially in vascular procedures for the brain, is just stunning.
How has technology transformed things like aneurysm repair or stroke treatment, stuff that used to require major open brain surgery?
The change is just dramatic. It's happened mostly in the last few decades. Today, something like 90% of vascular procedures, things like securing a ruptured brain aneurysm or pulling out a clot causing an acute stroke, are done minimally invasively.
90%.
Usually through a catheter, a surgeon makes a tiny incision, often down on the groin, threads a sophisticated catheter up through the major arteries, all the way to the brain, and performs the entire procedure using real-time X-ray guidance, fluoroscopy.
Incredible, instead of opening the skull.
Exactly. And this massive reduction in invasiveness has completely changed recovery times, patient outcomes, mortality rates, especially for those acute, time-sensitive events like stroke.
But while interventions for things like stroke have advanced so much, the challenge of brain tumors, like glioblastoma, remains incredibly difficult, right? Even with the best surgery, the prognosis is often still quite poor.
Glioblastoma is, as one neurosurgeon in the sources noted, it's a truly terrible disease. The core difficulty is its microscopic, infiltrative nature.
Meaning it spreads out.
Exactly. Even when a surgeon achieves what looks like a 100% complete removal of the visible tumor on an MRI scan, it's almost never curative. Because tumor cells, microscopic cells, have already spread out, infiltrated beyond that visible edge.
Oh, they always grow back.
They inevitably remain and eventually repopulate the tumor. So the future there, the hope, isn't just in better surgery. It's really rooted in molecular medicine, in genetic profiling, understanding the specific mutations driving that particular tumor in that patient, so you can tailor chemotherapy, radiation, maybe immunotherapies much more precisely.
Personalizing the attack on the tumor cells themselves.
That's the direction.
Okay, now let's shift to the technology that honestly still feels like it's straight out of science fiction. Brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. What's the fundamental idea here? How do they actually bridge that gap between a thought and an action?
Fundamentally, a BCI is a system that records brain signals and then decodes them. It's a recording and decoding system.
Recording electrical signals.
Exactly, electrical signals from the brain. You can use non-invasive methods like putting an EG cap on the scalp, or you can use invasive methods, which offer much higher fidelity. Things like electrocorticography, ECOG, placing sensors right on the brain's surface, or even erase that record from single neurons.
And then a computer figures out what those signals mean.
Right. A sophisticated computer system, usually involving a lot of AI and machine learning now, analyzes those complex electrical patterns and interprets them to perform a desired action. The main medical goal currently is to restore lost function, usually movement or communication for people who are severely paralyzed.
The case study involving Anne, the patient paralyzed by a stroke, that's often cited as a huge breakthrough, especially for decoding speech. How did they manage to interpret her thoughts into actual fluent speech with such high accuracy?
Anne's case is remarkable. She had a brainstem stroke, leaving her completely lucid mentally, but unable to move or speak locked-in syndrome. The research team implanted an array of 253 ECOG sensors directly onto the surface of her brain regions involved in speech production.
253 sensors, wow.
Yeah, high density. And the AI wasn't reading her mind in the sense of abstract thoughts. It needed to be trained to decode her attempts to speak the neural signals generated when she tried to move her vocal tract muscles, even though no sound came out. The motor intent.
How accurate did they get?
Amazingly, they hit about 50% accuracy decoding words on the very first day. And within just a week of intensive training sessions, they reached about 95% accuracy.
95% accuracy within a week. That's incredibly fast learning for the AI.
It really is.
Huh.
Show the power of machine learning and the plasticity of the brain signals.
But generating fluent conversational speech, that seems way more complex than just recognizing a few dozen words. It needs the nuance, the flow of language.
It absolutely does. And the complexity comes down to what the neurosurgeon involved called deriving computational units.
Computational unit.
Meaning the AI wasn't trying to decode whole words directly. Instead, it was decoding the fundamental phonetic elements, the building blocks of speech.
Like consonants and vowels.
Exactly. But more than that, the specific positions, movements, and timing of the tongue, the jaw, the larynx, the lips, all the things that produce those consonants and vowels, it was decoding the motor commands for those articulators.
So it learned the alphabet of speech production from her brain signals.
A very sophisticated alphabet, yes. Once those fundamental units, those phonemes, were accurately decoded in real time, the system then used what linguists call the generative property of speech.
Generative property.
It means the AI could take those individual sound elements, which by themselves have no meaning, and instantly combine them in the correct sequence to generate basically any meaningful word or sentence. It wasn't limited to a preset vocabulary. It could construct novel sentences on the fly, achieving smooth, streaming conversation with a delay of less than a second.
That is just mind-blowing. To get that level of detail, the signal resolution must be immense. Can you give us a sense of scale? How much better is putting sensors on the brain, like ECOG, compared to just recording from a scalp with EEG?
Oh, the difference in resolution is colossal. It's orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
If you think of a standard non-invasive scalp EEG recording as having, let's say, an arbitrary resolution unit of 1,
Okay, baseline of 1.
then the ECOG recordings, placed directly on the surface of the cortex under the skull, offer a resolution that's roughly 1,000 times better.
1,000 times. Wow.
Yeah. Massive jump in signal clarity and spatial precision. And the technology is pushing even further towards recording from individual single neurons, which offers the absolute finest detail. But the big challenge there, long-term, is stability. The immune system reacting to the implant. The electrode may be shifting slightly relative to the neuron over time. ECOG offers a good balance of high fidelity and relative stability right now.
This kind of phenomenal technology, being able to decode thought into speech, it naturally bumps up against those huge philosophical questions, doesn't it? Like the nature of consciousness itself, especially when neurosurgeons talk about structures like the corpus callosum.
Absolutely. The corpus callosum, it's this magnificent structure described in the sources as a thick band of glistening white nerve fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres in the brain. It carries billions of bits of information back and forth in milliseconds. It's the main communication highway.
And sometimes, for severe epilepsy, surgeons used to cut it, a callosotomy.
Yes, historically, for certain types of severe intractable epilepsy that spread rapidly between hemispheres, surgically sectioning the corpus callosum was a treatment of last resort. And this often leads to a really fascinating condition called dissociation syndrome, or split brain syndrome.
And what are the implications of that dissociation? It raises that really unsettling possibility. Does cutting that connection create two separate streams of awareness inside one head?
That is precisely the profound question that arises. Patients who've undergone a complete callosotomy can exhibit some very strange behaviors. One hand might literally be doing something against the will of the other hand. Information presented to one visual field going to one hemisphere might not be accessible to the other hemisphere for verbal report. It really looks like the two hemispheres are operating independently, sometimes unaware of each other's actions or knowledge.
So, two consciousnesses.
That leads directly to the highly debated philosophical question. Does this procedure effectively create two consciousnesses residing in one skull? It's a deep rabbit hole.
How do neurosurgeons who deal with this grapple with that question?
Well, when directly confronted with this philosophical minefield in the source material, the neurosurgeon cited acknowledges that it is, quote, a harder question, a really difficult one. And he suggests that many practitioners, in order to function and help patients, choose to operate based on a more practical functional definition of consciousness, one that allows them to assess awareness, alleviate suffering, and do their necessary work rather than getting completely bogged down in an infinite, perhaps unanswerable, existential debate.
A pragmatic approach to a profound mystery. Okay, looking ahead now. The neurosurgeon Dr. Edward Chang, who worked on Anne's case, predicts that BCI devices won't stay purely medical forever. they'll inevitably shift towards enhancement.
Yes, that prediction seems almost inevitable based on the trajectory of technology, doesn't it? BCI devices will keep getting smaller, more powerful, safer, maybe even wireless. As Dr. Chang suggests, the underlying technology doesn't really break any known laws of physics.
It's an engineering challenge, mostly.
Largely, yes. And once the technology is perfected and widely adopted for medical restoration needs, its evolution into enhancement-level technologies, capabilities that go beyond baseline human function, maybe augmenting memory, focus, or even communication speed, seems highly probable.
Which opens up a whole universe of ethical questions.
Oh, absolutely. Huge ethical deliberations required about access, equity, what it means to be human. It's a conversation we need to start having now, not when the tech is already here.
And this idea of enhancement, it dovetails really nicely with Dr. Michael Snyder's earlier work we discussed on agiotypes, right? The future isn't just about repairing brain damage. It might be about reversing brain aging.
Exactly. That connection is key. Dr. Snyder's focus on measuring and characterizing the specific biological age of individual organs and systems, including the brain agiotype, suggests a future where we could potentially target neurological aging specifically. Well, we're already seeing early research into things like stem cell therapy as a potential path for neurological repair, particularly in neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. If you combine that kind of targeted biological rejuvenation with advanced BCI for maintaining or even enhancing cognitive function, well, it points toward a future where our intellectual and cognitive lifespan could potentially be extended quite dramatically.
A future where old age doesn't necessarily mean cognitive decline.
That seems to be the direction some of this research is pointing towards. Pretty profound implications.
Okay, we've gone from prenatal vitamins to brain-computer interfaces. Now let's transition to our final segment, bringing it all together by looking at the ultimate reality, the philosophy of time, longevity, and the inevitable end of life. Segment 3, the spiritual journey of longevity and death. There seem to be different camps within the longevity movement itself, right? Different philosophies driving people.
Oh, definitely. Based on the sources looking at this movement over decades, it really splits practitioners into two main camps with quite different vibes.
What's the first camp like?
The first camp is often characterized by what the source calls a palpable anxiety vibe.
Anxiety-driven.
Yeah. It's driven by a deep, perhaps primal fear of cessation, of non-existence. Their mandate often sounds like, we're never going to die no matter what it takes at any cost. It can feel quite fear-based, sometimes lacking balance.
Okay, so that's one approach. What defines the other camp? The philosophy they call the chosen lifespan. Seems wiser somehow.
It does often come across as more reflective. This group, which includes many of the movement's sort of pioneers and more thoughtful figures, approaches longevity with a focus on acceptance and, critically, quality of life.
Health span, not just lifespan.
Exactly. Their goal is radical health span and maintaining a high quality of life. They use all the tools, biohacking, personalized optimization, everything we've discussed, to manage the aging process for as long as they choose to. But crucially, they maintain ultimate control and agency, meaning they reserve the right to die at a time and by a method of my choosing. The focus is on living well, upgrading health, staying functional, but ultimately embracing surrender when the time feels right, rather than pursuing immortality purely as an escape from fear.
That acceptance of surrender, it leads us perfectly into the insights from Suzanne O'Brien. She's an end-of-life nurse, supported over 1,000 people through their final days and hours. What does she say actually creates the best death, the most peaceful end?
Suzanne O'Brien's central insight, repeated throughout her work, is really profound and maybe simple in a way. She says the most beautiful, peaceful ends she has witnessed are consistently those where people feel they have lived fully.
Lived fully, no regrets.
Essentially, yeah. Being able to be completely present, without major regrets hanging over them, allows them to connect deeply with their loved ones during those final moments. For her, end-of-life care isn't just medical management. It's a profound spiritual journey. And she observes these predictable, almost universal transformative phenomena that occur.
What kind of phenomena does she describe? She talks about this feeling, this spiritual veil lifting.
Yes, the spiritual veil. She describes this radical shift in perception where clock time, our normal linear sense of time, seems to just disappear for the person dying. They enter a different temporal space.
Wow.
And often there's a palpable, almost tangible sense of a loving vibration that fills the room, a feeling of peace that seems to dissolve tension and fear, even in very sterile or non-ideal environments like a busy hospital room.
A shift in the energy of the space.
Exactly.
Huh.
And interestingly, she notes that for many people, even those who had very strict lifelong adherence to a particular religious dogma, that often transitions in the final stages. It broadens into a more powerful, expansive spirituality. Less about specific rules, more about universal connection and love.
The anecdotes she shares directly from patients or her observations, those are incredibly powerful, things that seem to transcend the physical body.
They really are. Suzanne O'Brien recalls some highly specific, almost clinical-sounding observations, like witnessing what she could only describe as seeing a patient's body leave him during the moments of a massive heart attack, something she couldn't rationally explain but observed.
That's intense.
And even more powerfully, perhaps, are the direct reports she hears from patients themselves, often when they're quite lucid, not heavily medicated. Their words frequently echo what you hear in near-death experience research, or even in the psilocybin studies. They often speak of there being no death, or that ultimately it's all about love.
Like the physical body is just being shed.
It suggests that, yeah. As the physical suit of the day, as one source put it, is dropped, the patient's core spiritual awareness perhaps becomes magnified, less filtered by the physical brain.
We can definitely connect this need for surrender and trust at the end of life back to the kind of inner mental work taught by someone like Gabby Bernstein, right?
Mm-hmm.
She focuses a lot on fear and our tendency to rely only on our own strength.
That link is absolutely crucial. Gabby Bernstein asserts pretty strongly that the very presence of fear, whether it's anxiety about money, relationships, health, or the ultimate fear of death, is a direct signal.
A signpost.
A signal of what? A signal that you are relying solely on your own strength, meaning the strength of the anxious, protective ego, that part of us that constantly insists, I have to control this, I have to figure this out, I have to keep myself safe. It's a contracted state.
And if the ego and its need for control is the source of the anxiety, how does Gabby Bernstein suggest we move out of that? How do we get into that state of trust, that guided impulse she talks about, that allows for peace, even surrender?
The practice she teaches is about consciously choosing to empty out, to intentionally release that tight grip, that need to control the outcome, to make space and allow guidance or intuition or a sense of a greater plan, whatever you want to call it, to flow in.
Emptying out to let guidance in.
Yeah. And she suggests you can actually benchmark the feeling. If you feel worried, constricted, like you're efforting and pushing and overly structuring things, that's the ego running the show.
Okay.
But if you feel expansive, peaceful, maybe a sense of lightness, like you're breathing free air, even if you don't know all the steps, that is the feeling of true inspired impulse. The inner work is about trusting that your core nature is actually joy and peace, and learning to gently release the fear-based protection mechanisms that are blocking that inherent feeling.
So if the fear of death is maybe the ultimate manifestation of that keep me safe at all costs ego, what practical tools exist, according to the sources, that can help bypass or maybe short-circuit that intense fear, making the end more acceptable?
Well, we have to come back to the clinical research on psilocybin again. It's mentioned specifically in this context.
The psychedelic research?
Yes. Controlled studies have shown that when a carefully dosed amount of psilocybin is given to patients in early hospice stages, often dealing with existential distress and fear of death, that fear can quite literally evaporate.
Evaporate? How?
The hypothesis is that the compound helps quiet down the default mode network in the brain. That network strongly associated with the ego, self-referential thought, rumination, the control center of the ego, you could say. By quieting that, it allows the spiritual, interconnected, more expansive side of consciousness to open up. It's like a chemical assist for the process of spiritual surrender that Suzanne O'Brien describes happening naturally for some at the very end.
Accelerating that shift away from ego-based fear.
Exactly. Another tool mentioned, perhaps an older, more philosophical one, is the concept of left-handed tantra.
Left-handed tantra, what does that involve?
It's described as a spiritual path centered on finding the sacred in everything. And that means everything. The practice demands that practitioners actively work to find the spiritual, the divine spark, even within the scariest, most profane, challenging, or uncomfortable aspects of life. Death, decay, fear itself.
So embracing the darkness to find the light within it.
Kind of, yeah. It's an intellectual and spiritual discipline of sanctifying the entire world, not just the nice parts. The idea is, if one can successfully learn to sanctify the scariest thing imaginable, death, fear, suffering, then it leads to a profound internal peace and acceptance when the end eventually does draw near. Nothing is outside the sacred.
A challenging path, but potentially powerful.
Definitely. And finally, Suzanne O'Brien brings it back to something very practical: the critical importance of time. Rejecting the speed and efficiency mindset we apply to everything else in modern life, she calls it rejecting the microwave instant dinner concept when applied to death.
We can't rush death like we rush dinner.
Exactly. She stresses the non-negotiable need for time and patience. She uses the analogy of a birthing doula patiently waiting for the umbilical cord to stop pulsing naturally before clamping it. In the same way, the disengagement of the spirit or consciousness from the body, that full spiritual transition, it requires time. It unfolds at its own pace.
So what does she advise families?
She strongly advocates for families to consciously create and hold a sacred space. Dim lighting, quiet presence, focusing on a loving frequency, sharing memories, just being there, and actively rejecting the internal and external pressure to rush things, to get it over with. She sees families often racing against the end, feeling unprepared, anxious, and they end up missing that crucial window of just being present, which ultimately defines the quality of that final connection and surrender. Allowing time is paramount. So wrapping this all up, this deep dive has really woven together some incredible threads, hasn't it? From hard science to deep spirit. It shows that optimizing our lives involves both, really. It's achieved through that personalized science, understanding our unique metabolic subphenotypes, like Dr. Snyder discussed, our individual agiotypes.
Knowing ourselves biologically.
Yes, and building on strong foundational proactive health, the stuff championed by Dr. Jeff Zade for prenatal health and Dr. Dominic Nishvitz for that crucial oral systemic link. That's the physical groundwork.
But it's not the whole picture.
Not at all. Because the quality of our life, and maybe most critically, the quality of our passing, seems ultimately governed by something deeper, by spiritual awareness, by trust, by that willingness to surrender to the larger plan or the flow of life. That sentiment came through so clearly from Gabby Bernstein's teachings on fear and trust and Suzanne O'Brien's experiences at the bedside.
So what does this all mean? Well, we've explored this incredible capacity of the human spirit, haven't we? The capacity to find innate joy, like Gabby Bernstein talks about. The capacity to create massive systemic change in health, thinking about Jerry Greenberg's food philosophy or Dr. Nishowitz's dental revolution. And maybe most profoundly, the capacity to surrender fear, even when facing the ultimate unknown of death.
That surrender seems key.
It does. And if, as Gabby Bernstein so profoundly states, the presence of fear, that tight, anxious feeling, is a sure sign you are relying only on your own strength, only on that controlling, contracted ego, then here's the final thought, the question for you to maybe sit with. What deeply rooted protection mechanism, what old pattern of needing to control or keep yourself safe are you currently holding on to, maybe without even realizing it, that could be blocking your own innate, joyful guidance system right now, that connection to peace and flow? That's a question rooted right back in those foundations we started with, and it's one only you can really explore.
Thank you so much for joining us for this incredibly comprehensive, wide-ranging deep dive today. We really look forward to exploring more with you next time.